Hope everyone's enjoying this beautiful spring day we had out there. Now is the time and place for a meeting of the Beaverton Planning Commission. For the record, I will do a roll call to verify which commission members are participating this evening. Commissioner McCann.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Holmes.
Present.
Thank you. And Commissioner Speck.
Here.
Great. And I'm the chair. I'm here, which is good. We have members Lago and Winters that are absent at this time. We are now at Commission Communications. Commission, any communications? Looks like no communications. We're now at Staff Communications. Staff, any communications?
Good evening, Chair Adams, Anna Slatinsky, Planning Division Manager for the City of Beaverton. I just have a couple of little announcements from the city. One of them is that there is a community vision survey that is out now through May to share your thoughts about the city. It can be found on the city website at www.beavertonoregon.gov/vision. And also, this is really cool. The library has a maker space that will be opening soon. There's a soft launch on April 12th. It's a collaborative workspace open to the public for making, learning, exploring, and sharing that offers, it says high and no tech tools, which is kind of intriguing, but it looks like there's 3D printing materials, sewing machines, drilling making, stamps, etc. So for those that enjoy doing that kind of stuff, it should be a pretty cool experience. And that is all I have in the way of announcements.
Excellent. Thank you, Anna. The first agenda item is a work session on the Transportation System Plan. The order of the work session tonight will be as follows. We will begin with the city staff presentation, followed by discussion and questions of staff by the commission. The Planning Commission will then hear public comments regarding the work session item. Individual comments will be limited to 5 minutes and must be directed towards the work session item. The commission may ask additional questions of individuals providing comments or staff. We will now begin with staff presentation presented by Senior Planner Jessica Engelman.
Great, thank you, Chair Adams. I'm going to share my screen. Are you seeing that okay?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Well, good evening, commissioners. As you mentioned, my name is Jessica Engelman. I'm a planner in the city's Community Development Department and the project manager for the Go Beaverton Transportation System Plan update. And I believe I'm joined online by Brian Martin, the Long Range Planning Manager. We're excited to be here tonight to talk with you about this Transportation System Plan update. What we're hoping to do tonight is provide you with an overview of what a Transportation System Plan is, what Planning Commission's role is in the planning process, and what to expect over the next couple of years. So we're really looking forward to hearing from you. I have a short presentation. It's broken into 2 parts. First, I'm going to go over what, as I mentioned, the TSP is, the Planning Commission's role, and the process that you play within that, along with the vision and goals. Chair Adams, if it's okay with you, I'd like to stop after this first part and see if there are any questions before continuing on to talk about the project approach and what to expect over the coming months and years. Does that sound okay?
I think that's a great plan.
Okay, terrific. So let's get started. There are several reasons to update Beaverton's transportation system plan. The first one is that the plan is dated. It's a long-range plan with a 20-year time horizon, and it's been 15 years since we last updated it. Long-range plans guide everyday decisions and investments in the city, so it's really important to keep it relevant and meeting the needs of our community. We know that transportation touches on several aspects of people's lives. And as a result, it's also connected to achieving all of council's goals, sometimes in ways that are obvious, like providing quality infrastructure, and sometimes in ways that might be less obvious, like how investments in housing can affect the transportation options that are available to people. And then the other thing we know based on the past 15 years of public comment and recent engagement efforts is that folks aren't totally satisfied with the transportation options that they have. And there is some frustration about not seeing outcomes different than those of the past. And finally, from a regulatory perspective, the city needs to conform to Oregon's transportation planning rules. All TSPs need to do this in the state. The state updated those rules, the transportation planning rules, a couple of years ago in 2022. So Beaverton has to bring its plan into conformance with them. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more in just a minute. So as I mentioned, it was 2010 the last time our transportation system plan was updated. And while that might not seem like a long time, a lot has evolved since that time. If you look to the right, you'll see a BlackBerry. That's just to give some perspective on which cell phones were dominating the market at that point. Also at that time, you know, smaller cars were the norm. People were buying sedans. Our MAX system didn't have an orange line. You couldn't tap on or off a bus. Paper fares were the norm. Ride hailing service Uber only existed for a year. Bike share and scooter programs, they just didn't exist. And Tesla hadn't become a recognizable brand at that point. And then thinking about bigger issues, like climate change, you know, warnings were given about what would be needed to combat the effects of it, but the effects still seem pretty far off and unimaginable to most people. Fires and smoke every summer weren't yet a reality. Air conditioning and air purifiers weren't a necessity. And thinking about racial equity and historic injustices were largely swept under the rug, leaving a system in place where historically disadvantaged communities continued to be underinvested in and overburdened. So I'm providing this context and those examples for two reasons. The first reason is to understand just how much has changed since the last time we took a deep look at our community's transportation system. And then the second reason is to illustrate that a lot of things that seemed unimaginable or unrealistic just 15 years ago did become real in a relatively short period of time. And so I like to keep reminding ourselves that we have that power of imagination and ingenuity and agency to really change the status quo. So let's get into more of the details, the rules side of it, and talk a little bit about Oregon land use law. I think most of you probably know there are 19 statewide planning goals in Oregon's revised statutes. Goal 12 addresses transportation. Goal 12 requires cities, counties, and the state to create a transportation system plan, or as it's often referred to, and you'll probably hear me say this throughout the presentation, TSP, that accounts for all relevant modes of transportation. That includes mass transit, air, water, rail, pedestrian, bicycle, and highway modes of transport. And it states that the resulting plan should support a variety of transportation modes, so residents are not limited in the ways that they can access jobs and goods or services available in different parts of their community. Like other Oregon planning goals, Goal 12 is implemented through Oregon administrative rules. The OARs that implement Goal 12 are referred to as Oregon's transportation planning rules. And those are what I referenced just in a slide back. Oregon's Department of Land Conservation and Development recently updated the transportation planning rules through the state's climate-friendly, equitable communities rulemaking effort. These updated rules, as I mentioned before, were adopted in 2022. So at that point, all state, regional, and local transportation plans need to conform to them. At the state level, that means that the Oregon Transportation Plan is updated. And at the regional level, it means the regional transportation plan was updated. And both of those now align with these new state goals. So cities and counties also need to update their plans. This TSP update will bring us, the city, into conformity with both the state rules and then regional rules, which could add on something to the state ones. I also want to bring to your attention that legally, Beaverton's transportation system plan resides in the city's comprehensive plan. It's Chapter 6. And this is important to note because any update to the transportation system plan is a comprehensive plan amendment, which is a type 4 land use action and requires Planning Commission to make a recommendation to City Council. So let's dig a little deeper on what was included in those updated state transportation planning rules. They differ from the 1990s version of the rules in several ways, and I'm not going to get into the specifics in this presentation. Right now, I just want to share that generally they're focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions from light duty vehicles, so like passenger cars and trucks. And they place an emphasis on creating a transportation system that is both safe and equitable for people living in the community and for vulnerable and underserved populations who need to get around our community. The transportation sector accounts for just over a third or 35% of greenhouse gas emissions in Oregon. And if you look at the graphic up on screen, you'll see that transportation accounts for the most greenhouse gas emissions in the state, higher than any other sector. And we haven't been able to make much progress on reducing it over the past 3 decades. So the state is taking several actions to get this number down. They're taking steps to electrify the transportation system, so things like funding programs that make it possible for people to move from owning a gas-powered vehicle to an electric vehicle, working to transition the state to cleaner fuels so that the electricity used to power those electric vehicles is coming from a clean source. And then they've also passed rules to help guide local planning, that's the transportation planning rules, to increase the share of trips that are taken by walking, biking, or public transportation. Those first 2 actions, electrification and transitioning to cleaner fuels, largely fall under the domain of federal and state policy and investments. But that third bullet, travel options, and really gets to travel options and behavior. And that's where Beaverton's transportation system plan comes in. And I just want to note here that in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by the amount that the state is looking to reduce them to meet that goal, all 3 of those actions are required, not 1 or 2, but all 3 are required to actually get us to our target. So it's our responsibility at the local level to invest in a transportation system where people can and want to walk, bike, and take transit for some of the trips that they need to make, thereby reducing our community's dependence on driving and reducing the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that are created by driving and manufacturing vehicles. And what you see on the screen are specific actions laid out in the updated state rules. Several efforts to address these actions are underway or have wrapped up. As I mentioned, Metro Regional Council recently adopted an updated regional transportation plan that's consistent with the new rules. The city removed all minimum parking requirements, so that one's done. And our long-range land use planning team is working on zoning reform through the Walkable Places project. And that's actually one that I know that you've heard about as well. So the transportation system plan is all the way over to the right in the lime green, and you'll see what we'll need to do in our TSP. We need to emphasize transit, walking, and biking modes of travel. We need to reduce reliance on auto levels of service as a performance measure, and we need to shift towards increasing the level of service for the bike and pedestrian systems. And throughout all of this, we need to be upping our game over in the yellow when it comes to community engagement and prioritizing projects and programs to get us to those equitable outcomes. So I want to be clear, this does not mean everyone who has the means and ability to drive must stop driving for every trip that they need to make. But what it does mean is that we need to make some adjustments to our system so that if you can't drive or don't want to drive, you can do this in a safe and easy and affordable and dignified way. I also like to remind myself and others that around 1 in 3 people in Oregon involuntarily don't have that option to drive themselves to where they need to go. And this can be for a variety of reasons. They may be too young to have a driver's license. They may have aged out of driving safely. They may have a disability that prevents them from driving, or they may just not be able to afford to own a car. So we need to be making certain that the system works for these folks, understanding that we all started at that stage. We'll probably, if we're lucky, end at that stage. And who knows what will happen in the middle. There's probably a point in time where we might need those other options. So to begin the process of updating the transportation system plan, we needed to update the plan's vision, goals, and objectives. And to do this, staff started by reviewing community input collected through other community planning efforts since 2010. We had 15 years of planning process to look through. We learned several common themes were present over the past 15 years. People want a higher quality experience from the city's pedestrian, bicycle, and transit networks, an experience that is first and foremost safe, particularly when walking and cycling. and that people are eager for third places like pedestrian-oriented streets where they can informally spend time together, run into familiar faces. And folks view speed and unsafe driver behavior as threats to the community's well-being, noting that streets with vehicles traveling at high speeds often make it feel unsafe and unwelcoming to people who are using them to walk or bike. We also reviewed the state and regional transportation plans. Those are always going to stay in our background, like the Oregon Transportation Plan and Regional Transportation Plan. And this was to ensure that the vision and goals and objectives that were presented to the community and city council as a draft were consistent with what's in these plans. Again, this is important because we're going to need to show conformity with them. Following the transportation visioning workshop, we opened up a survey to the community asking for thoughts on the draft vision, goals, and objectives. And depending on the question, about 80 to 90% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed with the vision, goals, and objectives presented in the survey. We received a lot of comments underscoring the community's enthusiasm for this topic and providing staff with a really robust set of information to help inform the plan. And the vision that council landed on is this: access for everyone, that we all have real travel choices, that we can count on, that we can afford, that we can safely enjoy, that help people and planet thrive now and into the future. And we'll drill it a little bit deeper on the 6 goals associated with that vision statement. The goals are areas of emphasis where Beaverton will take actions and adopt policies. So under each goal, there's a set of objectives defining the outcomes that Beaverton wants to achieve. And I'm just going to quickly run through each of those. Convenient choices is a goal. It's about making it easy to walk, bike, and take public transportation. It's also about helping folks who drive be able to transition over to electric vehicles. And it's about making sure that we think about a person's entire trip from start to end, understanding that all trips start with walking or rolling and often involve another mode of travel, be that public transportation, bicycling, scooting, or driving. Reliable choices for everyone. This is about making sure a person can count on the system or service to be useful and that they can plan their day with certainty, knowing that the system will reliably work the same every day. For example, that a bus shows up on time and the transit trip takes about the same amount of time each day. The goal of affordable choices for everyone takes into consideration the collective cost of housing and transportation. It's also about making it possible for households and individuals to reduce one side of that equation and spend less on transportation if they desire to or need to. And finally, it's about making sure that the system enables residents and business owners to access jobs and education and resources so that everyone in the community can prosper. Connected, active, and enriching choices for everyone is about working toward a system where everyone can use it, independent of whether they're able to drive, including children and youth and older adults and people with disabilities. But it's also about considering how businesses in Beaverton can continue to connect with and expand connections with customers. And sustainable and carbon-free choices for everyone. This is about making sure that we can think about how we can simultaneously get to where we need to go, while also being good stewards of the natural environment. Finally, there are 4 strategic lenses that we will be applying to decisions as we go through the plan update. The strategic lenses offer a way of viewing a policy or a project or a scenario from a particular angle. We expect the strategic lenses are going to be helpful, particularly as we move towards needs identification and solutions and a process for prioritizing projects. So with that, just want to pause. That was a lot of information. I'll say that the second half is not as long as the first half. Maybe it was a little bit like 2/3, 1/3. And see if you have any questions, particularly whether you have questions about your understanding of what a transportation plan is, system plan is, what those state planning rules are, and Planning Commission's role in this transportation system plan update.
Commissioners, any questions?
I guess just my kind of question is, you mentioned that Metro had adopted a new plan. Like, are we mostly in line? Are we deviating from that in any way? I guess if there's just any differences between those, or if there are, why, or are we just kind of following along with what they adopted?
Yeah, it's really a cascading set of rules and plans, I would say, right? So the state really sets the broad rules of what that regional plan has to um, be in conformity to. So there weren't really many surprises on that, and I think it's what we would expect. They're in the process of updating what's called the Regional Transportation Functional Plan, which is a total mouthful, but that's the regional rules. So they have an opportunity. They cannot differ from the state rules, but they can add on other things or have something that's consistent with it in addition to the state rules. I think that it'll probably give a little bit more detail about performance standards, and we already have an idea of where it's headed. So we're tracking it, and we need to be in conformity with it. So we're definitely not going to be different than it, but there's a lot of latitude. There is latitude within that to make decisions on how we decide to implement it at the city itself, at the city level.
Great. Hey, Jessica, I noticed in the documents that we were sent that the state had provided or gifted 300,000 to the city to conduct this study. Is that enough to cover the cost, or is there additional expense on the city?
No, that is definitely not enough to cover the cost, and we knew that going in. I think I'm very grateful that we got that source of money when we did, because it is still there. So it's now 300, and the original grant that we got was 300,000. As we scoped it, they added on another 42,000 to that. So as contingency in case we have to do some modeling because of the state's rules. So, but the whole project itself is just over $1 million. We have been making payments over the last couple of years, fiscal years, that is meeting our end of the match. We're way overmatched on it, but that's just really what it's taking to support this. There's a lot of city staff that are working on it, but we also need some consultant time on this as well. So we've been making our payments over the last couple. 2 of them have been made. We have 1 more left.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, commissioners? Looks like we have no further questions.
Okay, great. Let me keep on going then. Oh, wait a second. That screen went to where I did not want it. Did not change for you, but it changed for me. 1 second. Okay. So let's talk about the approach that we're taking to this TSP update. We're calling it an envision and enable approach. So it begins with analyzing existing conditions and getting our bearings about how the system is working today. And we're going to do this through data analysis and also by going out into the community and learning about people's everyday experiences using the system. Once we understand how things are working today, we'll turn toward defining Beaverton's transportation future, how we want the streets, how we want the city's networks and streets to look and function. To identify the needs and solutions, we'll compare today's conditions to that future system of how we want it to look and function, and that will be the needs. Then we'll work with you work with you in the council to prioritize projects and develop a game plan for adjusting city plans and codes and standards to enable those changes, so that we can incrementally build out that complete system. At every point in this process, we'll be engaging with the community, gathering information to help inform the plan. I'm going to go over each of these steps in more detail so that you can get an idea of what's included in them. So right now we are in the process of analyzing where people live and work, the types of trips people are making, and inventorying information about Beaverton streets and sidewalks and bike routes and public transit service, including information about how they're paid for, how they're built, how they're taken care of, and where there are safety concerns based on both past crash history and factors that could contribute to the severity of a crash. To complement this, we're going out into the community this spring and summer. We're already on our way. We've had a couple of meetings to learn firsthand about people's experiences using today's system. We'll inquire about where people have safety concerns and where they might want to travel for short trips, local trips by walking, rolling, biking, or taking public transportation, but where they might not be able to or feel comfortable doing so now based on current conditions. We know that the transportation system makes a big difference in people's lives, so we're really looking forward to hearing about how people are using or not using the system today and what changes might enable them to travel in ways that they want to and that also advance the vision and goals of the plan. We plan on coming back to council and to y'all this fall. As we move into defining what a future system should look and function like, we'll be doing this in 2 ways. The first way is by defining what is included in a complete network. We'll be defining this for the pedestrian, bicycle, public transportation, vehicular, freight, and emergency vehicle networks. And we'll look both at how a network functions on its own and how the network connects to each other. For example, how people can use the pedestrian network to safely and comfortably access the bus network. We'll be bringing you maps and definitions of what could be included in a complete network, including expectations for various components like street crossings and street designs that are in alignment with the vision and goals. As I mentioned, the gap between where we are today versus where we want to be, that will be considered a need. And we expect that the needs are going to be plentiful. As we identify the needs, we're going to also want to be acknowledging that it's going to take time and resources to address them, and that change will occur incrementally. That being said, we can really only by knowing where the needs are can the city then set out to address them strategically. For example, in places where there's the greatest opportunity to see benefits. Again, we expect what we learn from the community over the spring and summer about where community members have safety concerns or see an opportunity are going to really help us compile this list of needs. Moving on to solutions, we'll be diversifying beyond just major capital projects, which have traditionally been the focus of past transportation system plans. This includes looking for ways to affect change through well-crafted policies and standards and processes that allow for those incremental changes and investments in the system to happen regularly. A large share of investments in the transportation system are completed with private development. So this project will update regulatory documents that will be applied to policies and to transportation work required with that private development. It also means exploring ways to make changes to streets more quickly through repurposing of existing public right-of-way and using less permanent materials such as paint and posts and removable planter boxes to more quickly respond to community needs and experiment with lower cost solutions. We'll also be looking for ways programs can complement capital investments. For example, programs that measure the performance of a project or promote the use of the infrastructure or encourage people to walk, bike, or take public transportation for some of the trips that they need to make. So we know that the needs will outpace the resources we have. So we're going to need to prioritize where to start first. We'll need to find those projects that can complement one another, amplify benefits, minimize burdens, particularly on those who are already socially vulnerable within our current system. Oops, there's one more. And I just want to wrap up by emphasizing a few key actions that we know based on existing research have the potential to advance multiple community-wide goals at once. And the overall project approach that we just went over centers around these actions, but I really want to emphasize them. They include reducing vehicle speeds. By reducing vehicle speeds, we reduce that chance of serious and fatal injuries. And create more welcoming environments for people walking, biking, and enjoying destinations along the street. It includes completing the pedestrian, bicycle, and transit networks. This allows people to get from one destination to another with confidence that there's going to be a reliable and direct route that will get them to where they need to go. It includes completing streets so that the pedestrian, bicycle, or transit journey feels welcoming and is safe and accessible to everyone, particularly for people who more heavily rely on these modes to access destinations, like youth and older adults and people with disabilities. And it includes focusing attention on where people are making short trips. These are the trips that are being taken locally, where the city has the most control over the design of the street and where people are the most likely to use active modes of transportation. to get to where they need to go if they feel safe. And it includes redefining and repurposing public right of way so that it provides more space for traffic calming, for those complete streets treatments, for public art, for enhanced greenery or tree canopies. So that is all I have for you tonight. If you have any questions about the project approach, or more specifically, the next step, the one that we're in right now, analyzing existing conditions, I'm happy to take them. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you.
Any questions from the commissioners?
Have you started to take a stab at, like, are there specific roads or corridors that you're targeting for this? Because I know there was the documents we got, there's like 11 types of roads and they're all very different. So is there a prioritization and like an area that would be targeted first?
So we need to look at all streets in the city. I will say that as part of this process, I think it's going to be important to start off with acknowledging which ones are ours and which ones aren't, like which ones do we have control over, because Beaverton is somewhat unique in that is that we have a big melting pot of roads. So we have several county roads going through the city. And then we have a couple of big state ones, right? Canyon Road, Tualatin Valley Highway. Those are state roads. But I will say that the designs that you saw in your packet at this point, that was really to just spark the imagination. We're using that as a way to have a dialogue with the community. But we will be looking at, in order to define what a complete network and complete system is looking at applying different design types to the entire street network in Beaverton. And by doing that, we really start to be able to think about how the design of the street integrates into the context that it goes through, right? Because you might have, and that's not necessarily going to be, you could have different contexts and functions for different segments of the street, right? If you think about Canyon going through downtown Beaverton, that's a very different planned context than it is further west heading out towards Aloha, for example. So that allows us to really bring in that nuance. So we'll be applying the street design types to the entire street network and bringing that out to the public for feedback. Then there are a couple of key corridors that we are going to be doing a deep dive on operationally, ones that we know that there have been safety concerns on, that do have a lot of mixed use land uses on there that where we want to support that context and that are in city control, right? So the ones that I believe we're probably going to look at right now, and if something wildly pops out to us while we're doing the existing conditions analysis that is contrary to that, we have the flexibility to potentially pivot. But we're looking at, Cedar Hills Boulevard. We're looking at Hall South, right? Like from 5th down to like 217. We're looking at like Milliken West, right? So City Hall over to TV Highway. Those are some of the areas where we know or we think that there is some potential to kind of walk through what that could look like from a corridor project perspective. Again, we're not going to be doing, it's not going to be at the level of like a corridor design. This is 1,000 feet in the air, right? This is like just teeing it up and being able to have that conversation on some key places that we might want to focus on in the future. Does that help?
Yeah, and I guess, and then the question is this city funded, or would a lot of this be tried to be on the docket for as those properties get developed further, it would be part of the development costs? I'm just trying to understand like how they would be
funded. That's a great
or... question.
I mean, for everything, it's always a mix, really, probably, right? I mean, there are things that once we understand what the expectations are for above the curb, those are probably that's probably going to be very much going to happen incrementally with development. There are certain things that need to happen more continuously, right? So if you're talking about the bike network, if you only complete one block of a bike network, it's not really super useful, right? And so I think that's part of the conversation as we think about implementation and the city's role and how we might be able to roll some of those things out more quickly and reallocating space or like thinking about what we can do in there. I think it's going to be a mix of it, and it has been in the past. So it's not totally changing it; it's just changing the what results from it. Yeah.
Great. Looks like Commissioner Speck has a question.
Yeah, I was just the scope of this project could be enormous, and you mentioned a few areas that you guys are targeting, but it seems like have you started to focus on where these destinations are? It seems like to get the most bang out of your buck, it's like figuring out where the most people are going, and the obvious one is making connectivities to the regional transit system, TriMet that's in place. So have you guys started to work towards that? And if you're really looking at private-public partnerships to kind of pull some of the right-of-way development off, have you guys started reaching out and engaging potential developers or whatnot? I mean, it seems like transit-oriented design is the obvious one to maybe start engaging to make some of this happen around the regional system. Have you guys started with any of that?
So TriMet is a part of our technical advisory committee, and we always want to be working with them on this. I think, as I said, there's so many different players in this. So by having a really solid vision and plan of like what our expectations are for the design of the street, where we're looking to invest first, our priorities, that really helps those conversations. Whether we're initiating it or somebody else is also looking to do something, we're in a position to be able to articulate that a lot better about where our interests are and how we really expect we want our system to be looking and functioning in the future. So I think it's good to remember that this is a 20-year plan. Like there is no switch. I always have to, like, some people are concerned that the switch can be flipped either way, right? But there isn't a switch. So I think that's just something that I want to make clear through this, is that we're enabling a system for this to happen incrementally, right? And I don't want to downplay that, because I think the other part that we need to remember is that we have a plan right now. We've always had a 20-year plan. We haven't been getting the results that we've wanted out of it necessarily. The outcomes are just not there that the community has been asking for. And so it's not that this plan never existed, it's just we're updating it to try to get different outcomes going forward. Brian, I see you're about to pop on. Do you have something you'd like to add?
Yeah, Chair and Commissioner. Brian Martin, Long Range Planning Manager. One element of the question was about key destinations, and we have done our kind of mapping work to identify areas with key destinations already based on data. And then part of the engagement this summer, kind of like starting right now, we've had a couple of events Monday through July or so. We'll be talking with community members to get the experiences of people who live here and like where they go and what routes they would like to go on. But also part of that conversation is like, what issues are you having? Like where are safety concerns, or where, if we improve the system, might you go? As far as working with development and developers, probably that is something we can think about later in the project when we have a strong or a more complete vision and like roadmap, sorry, pun, about where we want to go, and some like priority projects, because then we'll actually identify kind of which landowners are kind of there and what possibilities might be available to the partnerships.
And a lot of the exercise right now seems to develop around street cross sections. Are you guys willing to remove lanes or limit lanes in order to be able to utilize the right of way to accommodate some of these walking, rolling alternative modes of transportation? Because you're going to run into a lot of constrictions if you're not willing to take away lanes and to provide, wide enough sidewalks for the type of activities that are being shown in these diagrams. And what kind of pushback do you expect to get if you are going to propose that type of implementation?
So I think the thing that I did not mention is as we go forward with the implementation is that we'll be working to also create a decision-making framework for how when we have to make decisions in constrained right-of-way or in constrained funding environments, right? And so you can imagine a lot of if-then statements. I think from in the past, we've really kind of chipped away at the outside areas, the pedestrian network, perhaps the bike lanes, things like that. And with the city's complete streets policy, we do have a modal hierarchy that basically is leading us to doing it from the inside out, right? And now that could, for example, you can imagine if a street is on the public transit network, might have a different calculation about what that outside lane width is versus if it's a local street, right? Or where you might be able to be like, okay, if we're going to need to cut something, we're going to cut something here first. As far as like reallocating actual lanes, I think that's something that we're going to try to, that's in there. We brought the project approach to council, repurposing the space that we have. That's the space that we have. And we're pretty built out as a city. There aren't a lot of places where we've got the option to just build a whole street anew. So I think that is part of the conversation. That's why we're going to look at those corridors in more depth to start kind of going through what the benefits of that could be. And looking at that in relation to what some of the other travel time outcomes, things like that could be. Yeah. For people who are driving, but it opens the conversation in a way that we haven't before.
Appreciate that. You bring up one of the reasons why I'm asking that question. It'd be nice if some of these streetscape sections, if there were examples of what alternate, these are like the idealized street sections, what alternate implementations might look like based on constraints. And I would just, one thing that just looking at the diagrams, I'm sure they're probably still in work just in terms of engaging the public. I'd love to see some actual dimensions on these because it's hard for people to kind of reference. A lot of people are going to have a tough time getting the scale from the get-go. So at least putting dimensions on there would help considerably.
I think we're not at that point yet. Really, I think the dimensions, those are built on dimensions that would be the optimal, right? And I think as we go deeper into project development, like if we were to take a project through design, you'd be able to start seeing that. I think we could simulate that for some of the corridors that we're going to look at through this planning exercise. But once a corridor would really be going into like a capital project or like a type of like implementation phase, that's when there would be more detail and options of what that could look like. It's hard to generalize that for every street because every street has a very different constraint with it, right? But I think we can kind of get into that conceptually. We found in the last couple of meetings, though, I will say that it's, I think the general public is really having, people really were able to help use it as a tool, just to generally imagine, like, what are the things that would be helpful, like crossing the street, like, oh, it's really great to have an island there to stop at. Like, I like that when that happens. It's, it's stuff that people haven't necessarily thought about or articulated, or stopped to think about it a lot. And the pictures themselves, without any like very details, we actually started stripping some of the text off of it. And that was helpful, even just to really have it be more of a free form of like, tell us your impressions of this, right? I think some people, I'm guessing that several of you all work in this field and probably are in the details a lot. It's always hard for me to step back to and be like, oh no, like sometimes we just really need to erase it and let people just see it without that. So we did think of that, and I think we'll bring that as we get to the decision-making framework. You'll see more numbers on the cross sections and kind of the
Yeah.
if-then statements and what the minimums and maximums and standards are that we're going towards.
And I just have one more question. It's within the downtown zone, have you guys started recognizing pedestrian only areas potentially as an opportunity?
So one of the things that we did with those, if you saw that pedestrian street in there, that was really, we added a couple of street types that we don't have, right? I mean, our street types right now in the engineering design manual are really a one size fits all type of thing. And we don't have anything that allows for just a pedestrian street. So that would allow us to kind of expand our toolbox essentially, to apply that to the street network in a more formal way on a network level.
Great, thank you.
Jessica, I have a quick question for you. I like the plans I saw. I like the drawings. They looked really nice, and they seem to incorporate all different modes of transportation in there, which is great. I can really see that for like the downtown area. For the rest of Beaverton, there's so much traffic, and we have a lot of traffic that goes through Beaverton. Has the city looked at, like transit kind of pullouts where, buses especially, they can pull off and out of the ways to let traffic go by to keep that flow going? Have they looked at that kind of modification to our traffic system?
I think as we look, we'll look at for other transit priority treatments that give priority to buses, like a dedicated lane perhaps, or a more signal priority, things like that. Bus pullouts aren't generally great for reliability from a transit perspective, so that's not necessarily, if we're looking to actually make transit a more reliable and enticing mode, that's actually that one treatment actually is not one that usually is going to get us there. But we are going to be looking at other transit priority treatments as we go forward.
Yeah, I was looking at it as kind of an overall approach, not like the approach. I like the idea of having dedicated bus lanes downtown. That makes total sense. But there's other areas, and the reason why I brought it up is I've had a lot of people come up to me and make the suggestion as well that we have those turnouts so that the traffic can keep going. Because sometimes, the buses, they have to stop for a designated amount of time and they block the traffic behind them. And it's just a way to keep everybody going and everybody happy.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see. I think traffic is going to be traffic in Beaverton. Like, we're growing, and I think it's part of this project is also just kind of remembering that we're in an urban area, and like it's not necessarily that's part of it, right? I think what we're really trying to do is think about safety and really understand where we're seeing a lot of where we have traffic traveling at speeds that are at a speed that could kill somebody or cause those serious injuries, right? I mean, speed also impacts the experience, the comfort level for several people who can't drive outside of that, right? So we're really looking at the speed, because even on some of those streets that you might think of, I just throw this out here just for food for thought, where at a certain time of the day, it's actually a very limited part of the day where you might not be going the speed you want to. You're going at a much slower speed. I'm going at a much slower speed. I've been there too. But the way that the street is designed, when we leave that 3-hour window, people can actually, it gives cues to people to drive at very fast speeds. And we're getting that reckless behavior that's actually putting a lot of other users, including the people driving, in danger. So I think there's always, that's something to think about as we go when we're talking about the street designs as well, is just thinking about it from a safety perspective, and a speed regulation perspective.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay.
Looks like no additional questions. Does staff have more presentation?
Nope, that's all I have. So that's it. But we will plan on coming back to you. You'll probably see us a fair amount over the next couple of years. So it's great to be able to introduce you to the project and kind of get you up to speed so that when we come back, we can have some really good conversations. Brian, do you
Great.
want to say anything else?
Thank you, councilors. Appreciate the questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now is the time for public comments on the Transportation System Plan project. For those viewing via Zoom webinar, please communicate by using the raise hand feature in your Zoom menu bar. If calling in, press *9 to alert the chair that you would like to speak. Staff has stated that we do not have any public comment. Do the commissioners have any questions, additional questions for the speaker? No additional questions for the speaker. The final item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from February 5th, 2025. Is there a motion to approve?
I move approval of the meeting minutes from February 25th, 2025.
Great. Commissioner McCann, is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Holmes. We will do a roll call vote. Commissioner Holmes, do you approve?
Yes.
Commissioner McCann?
Yes.
Commissioner Speck?
Yes.
And I as well approve, and that motion passes. We are now adjourned at 7:22 p.m. I appreciate everyone being here, and thank you, staff.
Thanks, everybody. Hey, I just wanted to mention that I'm going to be sending out some invitations in the next day or so, just to schedule some check-ins with you, see how things are going, whether you have any feedback, make sure that all is well, and we'll be meeting next later on this month to talk about Oregon land use law and recent changes in state law. So, looking forward to that conversation.
Great. Thank
Thanks,
you, Anna.
everybody.
Everybody have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Recording